Deep in the heart of Oregon, winding through the scenic Blue Mountains, lies a hidden gem of American railroading history, the Sumpter Valley Railroad. More than just a preserved steam railway, this line carries an untold story of gold, timber, and sheer resilience. Welcome to the fascinating world of the Sumpter Valley Railroad. The Gold Rush Connection. The origins of the Sumpter Valley Railroad date back to 1890 when it was built to serve the booming gold mining industry in Baker County. Unlike most railroads of its era, which transported passengers first, this one was designed primarily to haul gold ore and supplies. Towns like Sumpter and Whitney flourished because of this narrow-gauge wonder. But here's the twist: by the time the railroad fully reached Sumpter in 1896, gold production had already peaked. Yet, the line survived, finding a new purpose in Oregon's massive timber industry. One of the last narrow-gauge lines in the West, most of America's narrow-gauge railroads faded into history by the mid-20th century, replaced by standard-gauge tracks. But the Sumpter Valley Railroad held on, staying operational as a working freight line until 1947. Even today, it remains one of the last surviving examples of an extensive narrow-gauge network that once crisscrossed the western United States. The locomotives that refused to quit. Here's a little-known fact. Some of the Sumpter Valley Railroad's locomotives had a second life halfway across the world. In the 1940s, several of its Baldwin-built steam engines were sold to Guatemala, where they continued operating for decades. But thanks to rail enthusiasts and preservationists, some of these same engines made their way back to Oregon, returning to the very tracks they once ruled. The ghost town along the tracks. Ever heard of the town of Whitney? It was once a bustling railroad hub along the Sumpter Valley line, supporting timber mills and freight operations. But when the railroad shut down, Whitney was abandoned almost overnight. Today, it's one of Oregon's eeriest ghost towns, with a few scattered remnants of its past still standing along the rails. A true relic of the railroad's golden days. A railroad that vanished, and came back. The Sumpter Valley Railroad was officially abandoned in 1947, and most of its tracks were torn up. But in a remarkable twist of fate, passionate volunteers resurrected a portion of the line in the 1970s. Today, visitors can ride restored steam trains along a scenic 6-mile stretch, experiencing a piece of Oregon's railroading past firsthand. Hidden treasure still waiting? Here's a mystery. Legend has it that somewhere along the old Sumpter Valley Railroad route, hidden gold from the mining days remains buried, waiting to be found. Could it be true? While no major treasure has been uncovered yet, history buffs and fortune seekers continue to search the area, hoping to strike it rich just like the miners of old. It had one of the steepest narrow-gauge grades in the West. The Sumpter Valley Railroad featured some incredibly steep grades, particularly near Tipton, where the climb reached over 3%. For a narrow-gauge line hauling heavy timber and ore, this was a serious challenge, requiring double-heading locomotives or helper engines to get trains over the pass. It once had the largest narrow-gauge yard in the U.S. The town of Baker City was home to what was once the largest narrow-gauge rail yard west of the Mississippi. The Baker City yards had an extensive shop complex, multiple sidings, and even a narrow-gauge turntable to service the line's locomotives and rolling stock. The railroad ran a rail bus for remote towns to serve small logging and mining communities along the line. The Sumpter Valley Railroad operated a rail bus, essentially a modified automobile that ran on rails. This allowed for faster and more efficient passenger service than full-size locomotives, especially in areas where traffic was light. The tracks were torn up and sent to Hawaii after the railroad ceased operations in 1947. Much of its narrow-gauge track was ripped up and shipped to Hawaii, where it was reused for sugarcane plantations. Some sections of track that remained in Oregon were later repurposed for logging railroads. A bridge that survived decades in the wilderness, one of the original steel bridges from the Sumpter Valley Railroad, was abandoned in the forest after the railroad shut down. Amazingly, when restoration efforts began in the 1970s, they found the bridge almost completely intact and were able to reuse it on the revived tourist line. The mysterious, lost train of Sumpter Valley local folklore tells of a ghost train that vanished in the early 1900s. Some claim that during a heavy winter storm, a train derailed and was buried under an avalanche, never to be recovered. While there is no official record of this happening, rail historians still speculate about whether an old wreck remains hidden somewhere in the mountains. An Oregon governor once worked as a brakeman on the railroad before he entered politics. Oregon Governor Elmo Smith, who served in the 1950s, reportedly worked as a brakeman on the Sumpter Valley Railroad during his early years. This little-known connection highlights how deeply the railroad was tied to the state's history. From its gold rush roots to its miraculous rebirth, the Sumpter Valley Railroad is more than just a tourist attraction. It's a living history book on wheels. So next time you're in Oregon, why not take a ride and become a part of its legendary story? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible railway adventures.